Take a slow breath. You're safe here. This is a story from Moonlight Japanese Sleep Stories. The Sleepless Garden and the Soft Moonlight. Prologue, where the garden never truly sleeps. The garden did not sleep. It rested, certainly, but sleep was something different. Sleep implied absence, a closing of awareness. This garden never fully closed itself. Even in the deepest part of the night, when the village beyond it fell into complete silence, something within the garden remained gently awake. Moonlight lay across the ground like a thin veil. It touched the raked gravel first, settling into the careful lines without disturbing them. Each curve held its shape, unchanged by darkness, as though the moon had memorized them long ago. Shadows gathered softly at the edges of stones, never sharp, never demanding attention. The air was cool, but not cold. It carried the faint scent of moss and damp earth, layered with something older wood that had absorbed centuries of rain and sun. Nothing moved quickly here. Even the wind, when it passed, seemed to lower its voice. At the center of the garden stood a small tree. Its branches reached outward in balanced patience, leaves barely stirring. They caught the moonlight unevenly, creating small islands of brightness among deeper shadows. The tree did not grow toward the light. It simply received it. Beyond the garden walls, the village slept. Houses held their breath behind closed doors. Paths lay empty, untraveled. Somewhere far away, a night insect completed its call and fell silent again. Inside the garden, time loosened. Moments did not follow one another closely. They spread out, resting side by side. Nothing here needed to arrive or depart. A person stood at the edge of the garden. They had not entered yet. They stood just beyond the low wooden gate, hands relaxed at their sides, posture neither hesitant nor eager. The garden did not invite them in. It did not turn them away. Moonlight touched their shoulders briefly, then slipped past, continuing its quiet journey across stone and sand. The person breathed evenly. They felt the stillness before understanding it. The garden's wakefulness did not feel alert or watchful, it felt patient, like something that had learned there was no need to hurry. The gate remained closed, not locked, not guarded, simply resting in its place, as it always had. The garden waited without waiting. And beneath the soft moonlight, in a space where sleep did not fully arrive, the night held its calm, ready to unfold, slowly and without effort, into everything that would follow. Chapter 1: Stepping into Stillness. The gate opened without sound. The person did not push it with intention. A light touch was enough, and the wood yielded as though it had been expecting this moment, not anticipating it, but allowing it. The hinge made no protest. The gate simply changed position, and the space beyond it remained unchanged. They stepped into the garden. Gravel shifted faintly beneath their feet, a soft, brief sound that settled immediately back into quiet. The lines drawn across the ground remained intact, accepting the interruption without complaint. The person paused just inside. Not to look around, but to let the garden continue being what it was. Moonlight lay evenly across stone and sand. Shadows rested where they had been before the gate opened. Nothing reacted. The small tree at the center did not move. The stones did not mark the person's presence. Even the air seemed unchanged, cool and steady against the skin. The garden did not acknowledge the arrival. It did not need to. The person walked slowly along the edge, following the boundary rather than crossing the open space. Their steps were careful but not cautious, as though the body already understood the pace required here. A stone lantern stood near the corner. It was unlit, its surface pale under the moon. Moss clung to its base, thick and soft, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The lantern did not suggest illumination. It existed as a shape, a memory of light rather than its source. The person stopped beside it. They did not touch it. They did not look inside. The lantern remained closed, complete without use. The garden held its quiet evenly. Somewhere, water moved too distant to hear clearly, close enough to be felt as a presence. It did not announce itself. It simply continued. The person's breathing slowed. Each inhale felt deeper here, though the air had not changed. Each exhale left the body easily, dissolving into the space without a trace. They continued walking. The path curved gently inward now, drawing them closer to the center without asking. Gravel softened beneath their feet, smoothed by careful maintenance and long familiarity. The tree waited. Its branches held moonlight in still fragments, leaves resting without tremor. The trunk bore the subtle texture of age, lines formed not by hardship but by patience. The person stopped a short distance from it. They did not sit. They did not reach out. The pause was enough. Time loosened again. In the sleepless garden, moments did not pass, they rested. The moon did not climb. Shadows did not stretch. Everything held its place gently. And as the person stood there, surrounded by quiet that did not demand sleep, the garden continued its calm vigil, awake in the softest way possible. Ready to reveal itself slowly, one still moment at a time. Chapter 2: The Lantern That Holds No Flame. Near the tree, the ground changed subtly. The gravel thinned, giving way to packed earth that held warmth from the day, now released slowly into the night. The person felt it through the soles of their feet, not as heat, but as memory. The garden remembered sunlight even when the moon stood alone. Another lantern rested here, smaller than the one near the gate, older in feeling. Its stone surface was uneven, shaped by hands long gone. Lichen traced its corners, pale and delicate, like writing that did not need to be read. There was no flame inside. There had not been one for a long time. The lantern did not seem incomplete because of this. It held its emptiness carefully, as though light had once visited and left its echo behind. The person knelt beside it. The movement was slow, unforced. Gravel did not shift here. The earth received its weight without sound. They looked into the hollow space within the lantern. Moonlight reached inside, touching the inner stone softly, illuminating nothing in particular. Shadows gathered at the edges, calm and untroubled. The garden remained awake, not alert, not watchful, aware in a way that required no attention. The person rested their hands on their knees. Breathing deepened further, each breath stretching gently, like water spreading across still ground. Thoughts did not stop, but they lost urgency, becoming faint shapes drifting past without weight. Somewhere beyond the garden walls, a distant sound rose and faded. It might have been the wind through the trees. It might have been water turning against stone. The garden did not respond. It allowed the sound to pass through its awareness without holding on to it. The person remained kneeling. Time loosened again, settling into a rhythm too slow to count. The moonlight did not shift. The lantern did not change. The tree did not stir. In this place, nothing needed to happen. Eventually, the person stood. The movement felt slightly heavier than kneeling, as though standing required more agreement from the body. Once upright, balance returned easily. They stepped away from the lantern. It did not follow. It did not recede. It remained exactly where it had always been, holding space rather than light. The person turned their attention toward the far side of the garden. There, beyond another low stone border, shadows gathered more deeply, not threatening, not secretive, simply thicker, like quiet folded upon itself. The garden's wakefulness seemed to deepen in that direction. And without hurry, without curiosity, the person began to walk toward it, as the sleepless garden continued to rest beneath the soft moonlight, holding stillness carefully, one quiet presence at a time. Chapter 3: The corner where shadows settle. The far side of the garden felt older. Not worn, not neglected, simply deeper in memory. Stones there were darker, their surfaces softened by many seasons of rain and shade. Moss grew more freely, spreading in uneven patterns that did not try to be symmetrical. The person approached slowly. Each step felt naturally measured, as though the ground itself suggested the pace. Gravel gave way to flat stones set carefully into the earth, their edges rounded and smooth beneath the feet. Here, moonlight thinned. It did not disappear. It softened, filtered by the angle of the walls and the presence of taller shrubs nearby. Shadows gathered not as absence, but as depth layers of quiet resting against one another. The person stopped near the corner. A low stone basin sat there, partially hidden by shadow. Its surface held a faint sheen of moisture, catching just enough light to reveal its shape. Water rested inside, perfectly still. No ripples moved across it. The basin did not reflect the moon clearly. The surface broke the light into fragments, soft and indistinct, as though reflection itself had decided to rest. The person leaned slightly forward. They did not touch the water. They did not disturb it. Simply being near it felt enough. The garden's wakefulness felt most present here. Not stronger, just closer. As though this corner had learned how to hold stillness more completely than the rest. The air felt heavier, but gentle. Breathing slowed again, deepening without effort. The body seemed to settle into itself, joints loosening, shoulders lowering, weight distributing evenly. Somewhere within the garden, a leaf shifted. The sound was barely audible, finished before it fully arrived. The silence that followed felt smoother, as though it had been carefully placed. The person remained still. Time rested. The moonlight did not move. The water did not stir. Shadows did not change their shape. After a while, the person straightened. They stepped back from the basin, leaving it exactly as it had been, holding water, holding reflection, holding nothing at all. Turning slightly, they followed the stone path as it curved inward again, leading them away from the deepest shadow without urgency. Behind them, the corner remained. Water resting in stone, shadows folded gently together, and the sleepless garden continued its quiet awareness, allowing even its darkest space to remain soft beneath the moon. Chapter 4: The Sound of Raked Lines. As the path curved back toward the open center, a faint texture returned to the night. Not sound exactly, more like the memory of sound. The person felt it before they heard it, a subtle presence that suggested motion without creating disturbance. The raked gravel came into view again. Moonlight traced the careful lines across its surface, each groove holding shadow gently along its edge. The patterns were precise but not rigid, shaped by repetition rather than rule. The person stepped onto the gravel. This time, the sound of their steps did not disappear immediately. It lingered just long enough to be noticed, a soft, dry whisper, like breath passing through cloth. They paused. The gravel fell silent again, returning to stillness as though nothing had touched it. The lines remained unbroken, accepting movement without losing form. The person walked slowly across the open space. Each step created the same faint sound, consistent and calm. The rhythm was unhurried, neither counting nor marking time. It felt like a conversation that required no response. The sound did not echo. It stayed close to the ground, dissolving almost as soon as it formed. The garden absorbed it easily, not holding onto it, not rejecting it. The person stopped near the center. The tree stood nearby, unchanged. Moonlight continued to rest among its leaves. Shadows lay quietly at its base. The sound faded completely. In its absence, the garden felt fuller, as though the brief whisper had clarified the silence rather than disturbed it. The person stood still. Breathing slowed again. Awareness softened. Even the memory of sound faded, leaving only the gentle presence of space and light. Somewhere far away, the night continued. Insects called and stopped. Water moved and rested. The village beyond the walls remained asleep. Here, within the garden, none of that mattered. The raked lines held their shape. The gravel rested. The moonlight remained patient. And as the person lingered in the center, surrounded by quiet that did not require sleep, the garden continued to exist exactly as it was awake. Calm and complete beneath the soft glow of the moon. Chapter 5: The bench beneath the plum tree. Near the edge of the garden, partly hidden by shadow and leaves, a wooden bench rested beneath a plum tree. It was simple, low to the ground, its surface smoothed by years of quiet use. The wood had faded to a soft gray, absorbing moonlight rather than reflecting it. The tree above leaned gently, its branches creating a loose shelter without enclosure. The person noticed the bench without intention. Their steps carried them toward it naturally, as though the space itself had shifted just enough to make the bench present. Gravel gave way to earth again, cool and firm beneath their feet. They sat. The movement was unhurried, careful, without caution. The bench received its weight without sound, steady and familiar. The wood held a faint trace of warmth from the day, now nearly gone. Above, the plum tree did not stir. Its leaves rested quietly, overlapping in loose layers. A few small fruits hung among them, round and dark, barely visible against the night. They did not fall. They did not sway. The person rested their hands in their lap. Breathing slowed further, settling into a deep, even rhythm. Each inhale felt complete. Each exhale is released easily into the cool air. From here, the garden felt balanced. The open gravel space lay beyond, calm and precise. The darker corner rested behind, deep and patient. The tree at the center remained steady, holding moonlight without effort. Nothing was asked to be noticed. Time loosened again, spreading gently across the bench, the ground, the leaves. Moments did not pass, they stayed, overlapping softly. The person leaned back slightly. Their body relaxed into the bench, shoulders easing, neck releasing tension that had not been noticed before. The garden seemed to support this without response, allowing rest to arrive naturally. A single leaf shifted overhead. It brushed lightly against another, creating a sound so soft it barely existed. Then stillness returned, smoother than before. The person remained seated. There was no need to rise. No need to continue walking. The garden did not require movement to remain awake. And beneath the plum tree, with moonlight filtering gently through leaves and shadow, the sleepless garden held the quiet, steady, patient, and endlessly calm. Chapter 6: The Slow Turning of Moonlight. Moonlight shifted almost imperceptibly. It did not travel across the sky so much as it softened where it rested. The edges of shadow beneath the plum tree blurred slightly, loosening their definition without disappearing. Light and dark learned to share the same space more evenly. The person remained on the bench. Sitting had become less an action than a condition. The body no longer searched for comfort, it had found it and settled there quietly. The air moved once. A slow, gentle passing, barely enough to stir the leaves overhead. The plum tree responded with a faint, collective motion, branches adjusting together before returning to stillness. No leaf fell. Nothing was displaced. The garden absorbed the movement. It did not echo. It did not linger. The air returned to rest, as though it had simply completed a small thought. The person's breathing matched the calm. Inhale and exhale flowed smoothly, without pause or effort. Awareness drifted closer to the rhythm, then softened again, no longer watching. From the bench, the garden felt complete. There was no center and no edge, only a gentle balance of forms and spaces. The lantern without flame, the raked gravel, the stone basin, the quiet tree all existed together without hierarchy. Time loosened further. Moments grew round, like smooth stones resting beside one another. Nothing pressed forward. Nothing fell behind. The person closed their eyes. Not to leave the garden, but to rest within it more fully. The moonlight continued without needing to be seen. Shadows remained without needing to be named. The sleepless garden did not mind. It did not require witnesses to remain awake. Its awareness was not dependent on attention. Somewhere beyond the walls, the night continued its slow unfolding. The village slept deeply now, roofs and paths held in quiet trust. Inside the garden, nothing changed. The bench remained steady. The plum tree rested. The moonlight stayed soft. And as the person sat with eyes closed, breathing slow and even, the garden continued to hold its gentle wakefulness, a place where rest did not mean disappearance, and stillness was simply another way of being present. A small shrine at the edge of midnight. Prologue, where the day forgets its name. Midnight did not arrive suddenly. In this quiet corner of Japan, midnight came slowly, like a shadow lengthening across still water. The sky above the low mountains released its last trace of color, and the narrow road between the rice fields dissolved into darkness. Even the insects softened their voices, as if they understood that the world was passing from one state into another. At the edge of a small town, one that rarely appeared in guidebooks and was seldom spoken of, there stood a shrine. It was not a shrine of importance. There were no rows of lanterns leading to it, no grand torii gate, no festivals to mark the seasons. Its name, if it still had one, survived only as a vague memory among a few elderly residents, and even they spoke of it with uncertainty, as though it might vanish if examined too closely. The shrine existed at a boundary. Behind it, the forest rose gently toward the mountain, trees layered one behind another like quiet witnesses. In front of it, the town faded into sleeping houses and unlit streets. Above it, the sky held the fragile hour when one day loosened its hold, and the next had not yet begun. The building itself was small, no larger than a single room. Its wood was darkened by age, not decay, but endurance. Rain had soaked into it. Snow had rested on its roof. Summer cicadas had clung to its beams and sung until their voices disappeared. No one remembered when it was built. Some believed it had been raised for a forgotten kami, one whose role was too modest to survive in records. Others thought it had never been meant for worship at all, but rather for something quieter to observe, to remain, to notice moments that would otherwise pass unnoticed. At midnight, the shrine listened. The stone steps leading up to it were worn unevenly, shaped by hesitant footsteps over many years. Moss filled the shallow grooves. Fallen leaves gathered where the wind rarely reached. On this night, the air was cool, though not cold. The season was changing, but it had not yet decided what it would become. Somewhere far away, a train passed, its sound stretched thin by distance. The shrine bell did not ring. It never rang on its own. Yet if someone had been standing close enough, if someone had been listening with more than just their ears, they might have felt a subtle shift, like a breath slowly released. Midnight had arrived, and with it, the quiet certainty that someone would come. Chapter 1: The Road That Leads Nowhere. The young man walked as though he were uncertain the road would continue beneath his feet. His name was Haruto, though he rarely thought of it anymore. Names belonged to daylight, to offices, schedules, conversations that demanded clarity. Tonight, his name felt unnecessary, something folded away and forgotten. The road was narrow and old, repaired only when necessary. On either side, rice fields lay dark and motionless, their water reflecting fragments of the night sky. Haruto's footsteps made little sound, absorbed by damp ground and worn pavement. He had not intended to walk this far. At first, he had only stepped outside to breathe. His small apartment, with its thin walls and constant mechanical hum, had begun to feel too close. Sleep had avoided him not violently, but persistently. Each time he closed his eyes, thoughts returned, gentle but unrelenting. So he walked. Gradually, the town thinned. Street lights grew farther apart, their glow weaker. Houses gave way to storage sheds, then to open land. The road curved slightly, and the forest appeared ahead, rising quietly at the edge of the fields. That was when he noticed the steps. They were unlit. There was no sign, no marker suggesting they led anywhere of note. And yet they were there, carved into the slope beside the road, their stone edges softened by time. Haruto stopped. What unsettled him most was not surprise, but the absence of it. He stood still for a long moment, listening. The forest offered neither welcome nor warning. It simply existed. The night air brushed his face, cool and faintly scented with earth and leaves. He told himself he would only look. The first step was shallow. The second is slightly higher. His body adjusted without conscious effort, as if remembering a motion learned long ago. At the top of the steps, the shrine waited. It did not draw attention to itself. It did not glow or shift or demand reverence. It stood quietly, its lantern unlit, its rope hanging still, offering nothing but its presence. Haruto approached slowly. Up close, he noticed the grain of the wood, the small cracks where years had settled. A simple offering box stood at the front, marked by weather and time. He bowed, awkwardly, unsure how deep or how long it should be. He had no wish prepared. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a voice spoke, calm and unhurried, not from the shrine, but from nearby. "It's unusual to see someone here at this hour." Haruto turned. An elderly man stood a short distance away, as if he had always been there. He wore simple clothes, neither old nor modern, and leaned lightly on a wooden cane. His face was lined, but his eyes were clear. "I'm sorry," Haruto said quietly. "I didn't notice you." The man smiled faintly. "There's no need to apologize. This is a place that's easy to overlook." Haruto hesitated, then asked, "Is it all right to pray here?" The man glanced at the shrine, then back at Haruto. "Yes. It's open to anyone, though very few people come anymore." Silence settled between them, gentle rather than heavy. After a moment, Haruto asked another question, one he hadn't planned to ask. "What kind of god is enshrined here?" The man considered this carefully. "That," he said, "is something no one remembers anymore." He paused, then added, "But people often come here on nights when they can't sleep." Haruto felt something loosen in his chest. "I see," he said softly. The man nodded once. "You don't have to make a wish here. You don't even have to speak. This is simply a place where it's allowed to stop." A faint breeze moved through the trees, stirring the leaves. The shrine remained still, listening. Haruto exhaled slowly. For the first time that night, he felt the road beneath his feet come gently to an end, not abruptly, but naturally, like a sentence finishing exactly where it should. Chapter 2: The People Who Arrive After Midnight. Haruto began to notice that the shrine did not belong to a single night. The first time he came, he had thought of it as an accident, something that happened only because he could not sleep, because his feet had carried him farther than intended. But on the second night, and then the third, the road seemed less accidental. His body remembered the turns before his thoughts did. His pace slowed naturally as he approached the stone steps. Midnight gathered around the shrine like a familiar presence. The forest was never the same twice. Some nights, the leaves whispered continuously, brushing against one another in the dark. Other nights, the air was so still that Haruto could hear his own breathing and the faint sound of blood in his ears. The shrine accepted all of it without reaction. On the fourth night, Haruto was not alone. He noticed it first as a difference in the air, an awareness that something had shifted. A figure stood near the offering box, facing the shrine, her back to the steps. She did not move when Haruto paused at a distance. She was a woman, perhaps in her late 20s or early 30s. Her coat was thin, unsuitable for the cooling night, and her hair fell loosely over her shoulders, as if she had not bothered to arrange it. She stood very still, hands loosely clasped in front of her, as though waiting for something that had not yet arrived. Haruto considered leaving. The shrine did not feel like a place meant for conversation. And yet, the woman did not seem startled when he stepped closer. She did not turn, but she spoke, her voice quiet and even. "I didn't expect anyone else to be here. I'm sorry," Haruto said, lowering his voice instinctively. "I can leave if." "It's fine," she said. "It's not a place that belongs to just one person." She finally turned to face him. Her expression was calm, but there was a tiredness beneath it, like a lake whose surface was smooth only because the wind had stopped. "I come here sometimes," she added. "When the last train doesn't feel like it's going anywhere." Haruto nodded, though he did not fully understand. He felt that understanding was not required. They stood in silence for a while. The shrine did not interrupt them. It did not acknowledge their presence in any visible way. And yet, Haruto felt certain that it was listening. After some time, the woman spoke again. "Do you know what this shrine is for?" "No," Haruto said. "I asked once, but no one seems to know." She smiled faintly. "That makes sense," she said. "If it had a clear purpose, it probably wouldn't feel like this." She stepped closer to the offering box, reached into her pocket, then stopped. After a moment, she withdrew her hand, empty. "I never know what to offer," she said quietly. "Coins feel too deliberate." Haruto watched as she bowed, not deeply, not formally, but sincerely. When she straightened, her shoulders seemed lighter, as if something unseen had shifted its weight. "I should go," she said. "It's easier to leave before the sky starts to change." Haruto wanted to ask her name. He did not. She walked down the steps without looking back, her footsteps fading into the road and then into nothing at all. Later that night, another visitor arrived. He was older than Haruto, perhaps in his 40s or 50s, with a posture shaped by long hours of standing rather than sitting. He did not approach the shrine immediately. Instead, he stood near the edge of the clearing, looking out toward the darkened town. "I walk every night," the man said, as if continuing a conversation already in progress. "If I go home too early, I don't know what to do with myself." Haruto listened. The man spoke slowly, without urgency. He did not describe his life in detail. He mentioned work only once, family not at all. What he spoke of instead were distances, the length of streets, the timing of traffic lights, the number of steps between familiar landmarks. "This place," the man said, gesturing faintly toward the shrine, "is a good turning point." After that, he fell silent. When he left, he did not bow. As the nights passed, Haruto came to understand something without ever forming it into a clear thought. The shrine did not gather people. It did not call to them. It simply remained, and those who were already close to the edge found themselves stepping into its presence. Some nights, no one came. On those nights, Haruto sat on the stone steps and listened to the forest. He found that he did not need to think about sleep. His body rested anyway, leaning against the quiet certainty of the place. Once, near the end of a long night, the elderly man appeared again, as quietly as ever. "You're beginning to notice them," he said. "The others?" Haruto asked. "Yes," the man replied. "The people who arrive when the day has finished are asking things of them." Haruto considered this. "Do they get what they need?" he asked. The man smiled, not unkindly. "They leave with less," he said. "And sometimes that's enough." The sky began to pale at its edges. Midnight loosened its hold. When Haruto finally stood to leave, he felt no urgency, no reluctance. The road would still be there. The shrine would remain. And somewhere between them, the night would continue to make room. Chapter 3: What the Shrine Remembers. The shrine did not change. That was the first thing Haruto realized, though it took several nights for the understanding to settle fully. No matter who came, no matter what was spoken or left unspoken, the shrine remained exactly as it was. The wood did not brighten. The air did not grow warmer. Nothing visible shifted in response to the people who paused before it. And yet, Haruto felt certain that something was being kept. Not stored like an object, not recorded like a memory written down, but held in a way that did not require preservation. As if the shrine was less a container and more a surface one that allowed moments to rest briefly before dissolving. On one night, a high school student arrived just after midnight. He wore his uniform, though his jacket was unbuttoned and his tie loosened, hanging unevenly around his neck. He climbed the steps slowly, stopping halfway as if reconsidering, then continued without looking back. He did not notice Haruto at first. He stood in front of the shrine, hands clenched in his pockets, shoulders tense. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I'm supposed to become." The words were not directed at anyone in particular. They floated in the air, then settled into the stillness. Haruto did not respond. After a long pause, the student let out a breath that seemed to empty him slightly. He bowed quickly, too quickly, then turned and left, his footsteps uneven as he descended the steps. The shrine did not react. But the air felt different after he was gone, as if the silence had widened. Another night, an old woman came with careful steps, using the stone railing for balance. She carried a small cloth bag, which she placed gently beside her feet before facing the shrine. She did not speak at all. She stood there for a long time, eyes closed, her breathing slow and steady. When she finally bowed, she did so deeply, her movement deliberate and unhurried. Before leaving, she retrieved her bag and adjusted its strap, as though preparing for a long walk rather than a short descent. Haruto noticed that after she left, the forest seemed closer, the boundary between trees and clearing less defined. As these visits accumulated, Haruto began to sense a pattern not in who came, but in how they left. No one departed in a hurry. Some left lighter, some heavier, some unchanged in any way that could be named. But all of them stepped back onto the road with a different pace than when they had arrived, as though the act of stopping had recalibrated something subtle. One night, Haruto asked the elderly man a question he had been holding for some time. "Does the shrine remember them?" he asked. "The people who come here." The man did not answer immediately. He watched the shrine as though listening for something beyond sound. "It remembers," he said finally, "but not in the way people mean when they use that word." Haruto waited. "It doesn't keep their names," the man continued. "It doesn't keep their stories. What it remembers is simpler than that." "What does it remember, then?" Haruto asked. The man turned to him. "It remembers the moment they stopped trying." The words settled between them. Haruto thought of the woman with the thin coat, standing without offering anything. And of the man who walked every night just to delay going home. Of the student whose voice barely existed when he spoke. "And when no one comes?" Haruto asked. The man smiled faintly. "Then it remembers nothing," he said. "And that, too, has its place." As the nights went on, Haruto found that he no longer felt compelled to fill the silence. He could sit on the steps, hands resting loosely in his lap, and allow time to pass without measuring it. Sometimes he slept there, not deeply, not fully, but enough. The shrine did not mark these moments. It did not distinguish between wakefulness and rest. It accepted both with equal stillness. Toward the end of one night, as the sky began its gradual shift toward gray, Haruto stood before the shrine alone. He did not bow immediately. Instead, he stood there, breathing, aware of the ground beneath his feet and the quiet weight of the hour. For the first time, he realized that he did not feel watched. He felt accompanied. When he finally bowed, it was not out of habit or belief, but out of recognition for the space, for the pause, for the nights that had allowed him to remain unfinished. Behind him, the forest waited. Ahead of him, the road continued. And between them, the shrine held nothing at all except the permission to stop. Chapter 4: The Shape of a Night Without Sleep. A night without sleep had a shape. Haruto had not known this before. He had thought of sleeplessness as an absence, something missing where rest should have been. But as the nights at the shrine accumulated, he began to sense that wakefulness was not empty at all. It was full. Quietly, densely full. On such nights, time did not move forward. It widened. Haruto arrived later than usual. The town clocks had already passed midnight, though the sky still held a faint memory of evening, as if reluctant to let go. The road felt longer than it had before, each step slightly delayed, as though the ground itself needed time to accept his weight. When he reached the steps, he did not climb them immediately. Instead, he stood at the bottom and listened. There was the sound of leaves settling. The distant echo of something mechanical, perhaps a train, perhaps only memory. And beneath it all, a quiet continuity that did not belong to any single thing. The shrine was there, unchanged. He climbed the steps slowly, one at a time, allowing pauses between them. The act felt deliberate, though he had no goal in mind. When he reached the top, he sat down on the stone edge rather than standing before the offering box. He did not feel tired in the usual sense. His body was awake, but not alert. His thoughts drifted, but did not collide. They passed through him like thin clouds, leaving no shadow. This, he realized, was what the shrine offered. Not sleep itself, but the space around it. At some point he could not say when the elderly man appeared. He did not announce himself. He never did. One moment, Haruto was alone, and the next, the man stood nearby, gazing not at the shrine, but at the trees beyond it. "You're staying longer," the man said. "I think so," Haruto replied. The man nodded, as though this was neither good nor bad. "A sleepless night stretches when you don't fight it," he said. "It contracts when you do." Haruto considered this. "I used to lie in bed and wait," he said. "For morning, I guess." "And now?" the man asked. "No, I don't wait," Haruto said. "I just stay." The man smiled faintly. "That's usually when the night shows its shape." They fell silent. Time passed without markers. There were no bells, no signals, no internal sense of progress. The sky remained dark, but not uniformly so. Subtle changes gathered at its edges, imperceptible unless one stopped looking for them. Another visitor arrived. She was younger than Haruto, wrapped in a large sweater that seemed to belong to someone else. She climbed the steps hesitantly, then stopped a few paces away, unsure where to stand. "I hope it's all right," she said quietly. "I didn't know where else to go." "It's all right," Haruto said, surprising himself by speaking first. She nodded, relief passing briefly across her face. They did not speak again. She sat on the opposite side of the clearing, hugging her knees, eyes fixed on the ground. Occasionally, she took a slow breath, as if practicing. The shrine listened. Haruto noticed how the night accommodated them both. It did not divide itself. It did not demand attention. It simply held their separate silences without confusion. After a long while, the woman stood. "I think I can go home now," she said, more to herself than to anyone else. She bowed deeply and carefully, then descended the steps. Her pace was still slow, but steadier than before. When she was gone, the clearing felt larger. "Is that what it does?" Haruto asked quietly. "It makes room?" The elderly man did not answer immediately. "It doesn't make room," he said at last. "It notices the room that was already there." Haruto leaned back against the cool stone. He realized then that he was no longer measuring his nights by whether he slept. The question had shifted. What mattered now was whether the night had been allowed to unfold without resistance. Eventually, fatigue arrived not sharply, but gently. His eyelids grew heavy, and his breathing slowed. He did not lie down. He did not need to. For a while, he hovered between waking and rest, aware of the shrine, the trees, the night air resting against his skin. If he slept, it was only briefly. If he woke, it was without urgency. When dawn finally began to take shape, it did so without ceremony. The darkness thinned. The forest regained depth. The world prepared itself to be seen again. Haruto stood. He bowed not because he felt obligated, but because the motion felt appropriate, like stretching after a long stillness. As he walked back down the steps, he understood something simple and enduring. A night without sleep was not a failure. Sometimes it was a form. And the shrine, standing quietly at the edge of midnight, knew how to hold it. Chapter 5: The Hours That Do Not Ask Anything. The hours after midnight did not behave like ordinary time. They did not request attention. They did not require decisions. They passed without asking Haruto to name them or explain their purpose. This, more than anything, distinguished them from the rest of the day. On these nights, Haruto stopped checking the time altogether. His phone remained in his pocket, unconsulted. The clock inside his mind, the one that measured usefulness, progress, delay, quieted on its own. In its place was something broader, slower, less defined. The shrine existed fully within these hours. It did not feel separate from the night, nor was it fully absorbed by it. It stood as a point of balance, where nothing was expected to happen, and therefore anything could rest. Haruto arrived early, or perhaps late. The distinction no longer mattered. The sky was uniformly dark, the kind of darkness that had settled completely and had no intention of changing for a while. The forest seemed deeper than usual, the trees layered so closely that depth itself felt compressed. He climbed the steps and stood before the shrine, then decided to walk around it instead. This was something he had not done before. From behind, the shrine appeared even smaller. Its back wall bore no markings, no symbols, no indication that it faced an audience at all. It was simply a structure: wood, joints, shadows standing quietly where it had always stood. Haruto wondered how many people had walked around it like this. Not many, he suspected. Most people approached from the front, bowed, lingered, and left. Very few had reason to circle it, to look at what it was when it was not being addressed. The thought did not trouble him. He returned to the front and sat down, resting his hands on his knees. The night unfolded. At some point, footsteps approached, not hurried, not cautious, but steady. A man arrived whom Haruto had seen before, though they had never spoken. He was thin, dressed neatly, his hair carefully combed, even at this hour. The man bowed briefly, then stood without moving. Minutes passed. Eventually, the man spoke. "I come here because nothing happens," he said. Haruto nodded. "At home," the man continued, "everything is always about to happen. Even when it doesn't." He stopped speaking after that. When he left, his expression was unchanged, but his shoulders sat slightly lower, as if he had set something down without realizing he was carrying it. Later, a couple arrived together. They did not hold hands. They did not speak. They stood side by side, maintaining a small distance, like two people sharing a view rather than a conversation. They bowed together, waited, then bowed again before leaving. Haruto never learned why they came. He did not need to. The shrine received them without distinction. The elderly man appeared sometime during the deepest part of the night. He stood beside Haruto, his presence familiar enough now that it did not interrupt the flow of thought. "You're beginning to understand the hours," the man said. "The hours?" Haruto asked. "Yes," the man replied. "The ones that don't ask you to be anything." Haruto considered this. "They don't feel empty," he said. "They aren't," the man agreed. "They're simply unassigned." The forest seemed to lean inward slightly, as if listening. "These hours used to frighten people," the man continued. "They still do. When nothing is demanded, people don't know who they are supposed to be." "And this place?" Haruto asked. "It doesn't assign roles," the man said. "That's why it lasts." They sat in silence. Haruto realized then that he no longer came to the shrine because he could not sleep. He came because the night itself felt incomplete without this pause, this point where effort dissolved. Fatigue arrived again, soft and unannounced. This time, he lay down on the stone steps, using his folded jacket as a pillow. The stone was cool, but not unkind. His body accepted it without protest. He did not dream. Or if he did, the dreams were indistinguishable from the quiet thoughts that drifted through him, shapes without edges, memories without narrative. When he woke, the sky was already lightening. Birdsong began tentatively, as if testing whether it was permitted. Haruto sat up slowly. For a moment, he felt the urge to stay, to remain exactly where he was, suspended between night and day. But the urge passed without resistance. He stood, bowed once, and descended the steps. The road waited. The town would wake. And the hours that asked nothing would recede, not gone, but stored somewhere just beyond reach, ready to return when the world grew too loud again. Chapter 6: When People Stop Coming. At first, Haruto did not notice the change. The shrine did not announce it. The forest did not signal it. The nights continued to arrive, one after another, indistinguishable on the surface. Midnight still settled into place with the same patience it always had. But gradually, the clearing grew emptier. There were nights when no footsteps approached from the road. No hesitant pauses at the bottom of the steps. No presence shifting the air beside the offering box. Haruto would arrive, sit, and remain the only one there until the sky began to pale. It did not feel lonely. That surprised him. He had assumed that the shrine existed because people came to it, that it was sustained by their quiet arrivals, their half-spoken thoughts, their pauses. But now, with fewer visitors, the shrine felt no less complete. If anything, it felt more settled. Haruto sat longer on those nights. He found himself less inclined to watch for movement, less attentive to the possibility of interruption. Silence no longer felt like a waiting state. It felt like a condition that had already been fulfilled. On one such night, he asked the elderly man a question. Do people stop coming because they don't need this place anymore? Haruto asked. The man did not answer right away. He was standing near the edge of the clearing, looking toward the road, as though measuring a distance that was not entirely physical. Some do, he said eventually. Some simply forget. Forget? Haruto repeated. Yes, the man said. Not the shrine itself. They forget the feeling that led them here. Haruto considered this. Is that a bad thing? He asked. The man smiled, very slightly. No, he said. It's usually a sign that the feeling has loosened its grip. That night, no one else came. Haruto lay back on the stone steps and watched the sky through the branches. The stars were faint, diluted by distance and time, but still present enough to suggest continuity. He thought of the people who had stood where he now lay. The woman in the thin coat. The man who walked to delay returning home. The student who did not know what he was meant to become. The old woman with the cloth bag. He did not try to imagine where they were now. The shrine did not ask him to. Another night passed without visitors. Then another. The pattern became clear not as absence, but as thinning. The shrine was no longer a place of arrival. It had become something closer to a marker, a point already passed. Haruto realized, with a quiet certainty, that he was changing along with it. He no longer came every night. Sometimes he slept before midnight and did not wake. Sometimes he woke and chose not to walk. The urge that once guided his feet had softened, like a habit gently releasing its hold. When he did come, the shrine felt familiar in a different way. Less like a refuge, more like an acknowledgement. On one of these nights, near the end of a long stretch of silence, the elderly man spoke again. This is usually when people start to worry, he said. About what? Haruto asked. That the place is ending, the man replied. That it will disappear once it's no longer needed. Haruto looked at the shrine. It stood exactly as it always had. It doesn't feel like it's ending, Haruto said. The man nodded. It isn't, he said. But your relationship to it is. The words settled gently, without urgency. Haruto felt no resistance. That night, he did not stay until morning. He bowed, descended the steps, and turned back once not to check if the shrine remained, but to recognize that he did not need to check. The road accepted him. Days passed. Nights followed. When Haruto did not come, the shrine remained. When no one came at all, the shrine remained. It listened to nothing. It held nothing. It required nothing. And this, Haruto understood at last, was its final kindness. One night, much later, he returned without intention. He had been walking, as he sometimes did, letting the town thin around him. When he reached the familiar curve in the road, he stopped, surprised by the recognition rather than the sight. The steps were there, lightly dusted with leaves. He did not climb them. Instead, he stood at the bottom for a long moment, breathing, listening to the forest, feeling the shape of the hour settle around him. Then he bowed from where he was. Not deeply, not formally, just enough. And he turned back toward the road, carrying with him nothing at all. Behind him, the shrine remained at the edge of midnight, unchanged, unmarked, and quietly unnecessary. Which was exactly how it was meant to be. Chapter 7: The Night That No Longer Needs a Place. There came a night when Haruto realized he had not thought about the shrine all day. The realization did not arrive with guilt or relief. It came neutrally, like noticing the weather only after stepping outside. The day had passed in its usual way: work, brief conversations, familiar routines, and the thought of night had not carried any particular weight. When darkness fell, it did so gently. Haruto went to bed before midnight. He lay awake for a while, listening to the quiet movements of the building, the distant sound of a passing car, the soft ticking of time measured indirectly. Sleep came without effort, thin but sufficient. Later, how much later, he could not say. He woke. There was no reason for it. No thought of pulling him up. No restlessness. His eyes opened, and the room rested around him, unchanged. For a moment, he considered staying where he was. Then he stood. The walk felt different now. Not shorter, not longer, but less intentional. His feet moved without the quiet insistence they once carried. The town appeared as it always had, yet it no longer felt like something he was escaping. When he reached the curve in the road, he slowed. The shrine was there. It had not grown smaller. It had not faded. It had not waited. It simply remained. Haruto did not climb the steps. He stood at the edge of the road, hands in his pockets, breathing evenly. The forest held its shape. The night neither deepened nor receded. Midnight existed without ceremony. He understood then that the night no longer needed a place to gather. The hours that once pressed against him heavy, formless, now passed through him without resistance. He could feel them, but they did not cling. Behind him, the town slept. Ahead of him, the road curved onward. The shrine occupied the space between, not as a destination, but as a reminder of a time when stopping had been necessary. Haruto bowed. This time, there was no sense of closure. Only continuity. He turned and walked back the way he had come. The night followed him, untroubled by the absence of pause. Epilogue where the road continues. The shrine remains. It stands at the edge of the town, at the border where roads grow quiet, and forests begin to listen. It does not announce itself. It does not invite. It does not remember names. Some nights, someone still comes. A figure pauses at the bottom of the steps, unsure why they have stopped. Another climbs halfway, then sits. Another stands before the shrine without bowing, without speaking, without asking. Most nights, no one comes at all. The shrine does not distinguish between these nights. It listens equally to footsteps and to their absence. It holds space for pauses that may never arrive. It exists without requiring recognition. The road continues. People walk it for reasons they can explain, and for reasons they cannot. Some walk because they are tired. Some because they are awake. Some because the night has grown too loud, or too quiet, or too full of unfinished thought. Most will never notice the shrine. Those who do will not always remember it. And that is enough. Because the shrine was never meant to be a place people stayed. It was meant to be a place they passed through once. Perhaps only once at the edge of midnight, when the world asked nothing of them, and they were allowed, briefly, to ask nothing of themselves. The forest will continue to grow. The town will continue to sleep and wake. Midnight will continue to arrive slowly, as it always has. And somewhere between the road and the trees, the small shrine will remain not waiting, not watching, but quietly present, holding nothing at all. Footsteps along the river of stars. Prologue where the sky touches the water. The river was not wide, but it was old. It moved through the town without hurry, carrying no sense of destination. During the day, people crossed it without looking down over bridges, beside guardrails, past houses that faced it without acknowledging it. The river accepted this indifference easily. At night, the relationship changed. When the town lights softened, and the sky deepened into its darker layers, the surface of the water began to reflect more than it received. Street lights stretched into trembling lines. The moon fractured gently, and on clear nights, the stars leaned downward, scattering themselves across the slow current. Some people called it the River of Stars. Not officially, not consistently. The name appeared in passing, spoken quietly, without explanation. It was the kind of name that existed because no one felt the need to question it. Along the river ran a narrow footpath. It had not been made for walking at night. It existed simply because there was space and unclaimed margin between water and town. The path curved with the river, sometimes narrowing, sometimes widening, sometimes disappearing behind tall grass before returning. At night, footsteps sounded different there. They softened. They slowed. They seemed to lose their urgency. On certain nights, usually when the sky was clear and the town unusually quiet, someone would find themselves walking there without intention. They would not remember deciding to turn toward the river. Their body would arrive first, and their thoughts would follow later. The river did not call them, but it allowed them to walk beside it. Chapter 1: The Man Who Walked Without a Destination. The man walked as if the night had invited him. His name was Kiyoshi, though he did not think of it as he moved. Names belonged to conversations, and he had not spoken since leaving his apartment. The door had closed quietly. His footsteps had found the street without resistance. He had not planned to walk this far. At first, he had only meant to step outside. The room had felt too still, too full of unfinished thoughts. Sleep had hovered nearby, never quite settling, like something uncertain of being welcome. So he walked. The town loosened as it always did after midnight. Traffic thinned. Windows darkened. Sounds stretched and lost their edges. When Kiyoshi reached the river, he turned without deciding to. The water moved slowly, reflecting fragments of the sky. He walked beside it, hands in his pockets, shoulders lower than they were during the day. His footsteps did not match the rhythm of the current, but they accompanied it, falling into a parallel pace. For a while, he thought of nothing. That, in itself, felt unusual. Halfway along the path, he noticed someone ahead of him. A figure stood near the railing, looking down at the water. The person did not turn when Kiyoshi approached. There was no tension in their stillness, only presence, as if standing there was the most natural thing in the world. Kiyoshi slowed. He could have passed without speaking. He often did. But the night felt open in a way that made silence optional rather than required. The stars looked clearer tonight. The words emerged softly, without expectation. The figure turned slightly. She was a woman, perhaps a few years younger than him, wearing a light coat that suggested she had not planned to stay out long. "They do," she said. "When they're reflected in the river, it feels like there are more of them." Kiyoshi followed her gaze. "It's strange," he said. "During the day, it's just a river." She nodded. "And at night, it becomes something else." They stood quietly for a while, listening to the water move, watching the reflections tremble and reform. The silence between them did not demand explanation. "Do you walk here often?" she asked, still facing the river. "Only on nights when I can't sleep," Kiyoshi replied after a moment. I see. She accepted the answer as complete. After some time, she straightened slightly, as if responding to a signal only she could feel. I should go back, she said. Yes, Kiyoshi replied. She walked away along the path, her footsteps gradually dissolving into the night. Kiyoshi remained where he was, feeling no urgency to follow or to leave. For the first time in many nights, the thought of sleep did not feel heavy. The river continued to move. The stars remained scattered across its surface. And Kiyoshi stood beside the path, aware quietly, deeply that this would not be the only night he walked here. Chapter 2: The Woman Who Counted Reflections. Kiyoshi returned to the river the following night without surprise. The decision did not feel deliberate. He did not weigh it against anything else. When the room grew quiet again, when the ceiling became too familiar, his body remembered the path before his thoughts did. The river was already there, moving as it always had. The sky was clear, though the stars were fewer than the night before. Or perhaps they only seemed that way. Reflections depended on angle, on patience, on how long one was willing to stand still. Kiyoshi walked more slowly than usual. He noticed small things he had not before: the uneven stones near the water's edge, the way the reeds bent slightly toward the current. The faint echo of his footsteps returning to him from across the river. Someone was already there. The woman from the previous night stood farther down the path, closer to where the river narrowed. She was leaning slightly forward, as if listening, her gaze fixed on the surface of the water. Kiyoshi approached without announcing himself. This time, she spoke first. "You came back." "Yes," he said. "So did you." She smiled faintly, still looking down. "I was curious," she said, "about whether last night would feel different if it happened twice." "Does it?" he asked. She considered this. "No," she said, "but I don't think it's supposed to." They stood side by side, separated by a small, comfortable distance. After a while, she spoke again. "I count them sometimes," she said. "The stars?" Kiyoshi asked. "The reflections," she replied. "Not to get a number. Just to see how long I can keep track before they blur together." Kiyoshi watched the water. The reflections shifted constantly. A star would stretch, divide, disappear, then return in a slightly different place. Counting them felt like an impossible task. "That sounds difficult," he said. "It is," she agreed. "That's why it helps." He did not ask what it helped with. She did not explain. The night accepted the space between their words. At some point, Kiyoshi realized that he felt lighter, not relieved, exactly, but less defined. as if the edges of his thoughts had softened enough to stop pressing against one another. "I don't usually talk to people here," the woman said quietly. "Neither do I," Kiyoshi replied. "But it doesn't feel like talking," she continued. "More like overlapping." "Yes," he said. "That sounds right." They watched the river until the air cooled further and the stars shifted again. Eventually, she straightened and took a small step back. "I think this is enough for tonight," she said. Kiyoshi nodded. "Me too." They walked in opposite directions along the path, their footsteps briefly echoing toward one another before separating again. Neither of them looked back. That night, when Kiyoshi returned home, he slept. Not deeply, not for long, but without resistance. Chapter 3: Voices that never cross the bridge. There was a bridge farther upstream. It was not large, nor especially old. Cars crossed it during the day. Cyclists passed without slowing. At night, it remained functional but unused, its lights casting pale arcs across the water. Kiyoshi did not cross it. He noticed, over time, that others did not either. People would stop near it, lean on the railing, stand beneath it, where the sound of the river changed slightly. But they rarely crossed from one side to the other at night. It was not avoidance. It was a preference. On one such night, a man stood near the base of the bridge, hands clasped behind his back. He did not look at Kiyoshi when he spoke. "I come here because it's the last place I don't have to explain myself." Kiyoshi listened. "At home," the man continued, "even silence is questioned." He paused, as if waiting for a response that did not come. "That's why I don't cross," the man added. "Once you cross, you're going somewhere." After that, he said nothing more. He left before midnight, loosening its hold. Kiyoshi remained, aware that some voices were meant to stay where they were spoken. That crossing was not always movement forward, sometimes it was an interruption. The river flowed beneath the bridge, unconcerned. Chapter 4: The Night That Walks Beside You. There were nights when Kiyoshi realized that he was no longer walking beside the river. The thought came gently, without urgency. His feet still followed the path, still aligned themselves with the slow curve of the water, but his attention had shifted. It was no longer fixed on where he was going, or even on the river itself. It rested on the night. The night had weight, he discovered. Not heaviness, but presence. It moved alongside him, neither ahead nor behind. It adjusted when he slowed. It widened when he stopped. And when he resumed walking, it followed without hesitation. On one such night, clouds covered the sky. There were no stars to scatter across the surface of the water. The river reflected only darkness, broken occasionally by the faint glow of distant lamps. The path felt narrower, less defined, as though it relied more on memory than visibility. Kiyoshi did not mind. Without the stars, the river felt closer to itself. Its movement became more audible, its texture more apparent. The water slid past stones and reeds with a sound that was neither loud nor soft, but continuous. He walked longer than usual. At some point, he realized he was no longer alone. Footsteps matched his pace, not behind him, not ahead, but just slightly to the side. He did not turn immediately. The presence felt familiar, not because he recognized it, but because it fit into the night without friction. Eventually, he glanced sideways. The woman was there again, the one who counted reflections. Her coat was buttoned higher this time, her hands tucked into her sleeves. She walked without looking at him, her gaze forward, as though they had agreed to share the path without sharing attention. "You came even though there are no stars," she said after a while. "Yes," Kiyoshi replied. "I didn't notice until I was already here." She nodded. "That happens," she said. "The river doesn't need them." They walked together in silence. The absence of stars changed the rhythm of the night. Without reflections to watch, the pauses between thoughts grew longer. The path felt less like a line and more like a stretch of time being slowly unfolded beneath their feet. "Do you ever feel like the night is walking with you?" she asked. Kiyoshi considered this. "Yes," he said. "Lately, it feels like that." She smiled, though he only noticed it in the slight change of her breathing. "I think that's when it stops being something you're inside," she said, "and starts being something you're part of." They slowed near a bend in the river where the water gathered briefly before narrowing again. The sound deepened there, layering itself in subtle variations. They stopped. Neither of them spoke. The night did not press them forward. Eventually, the woman took a step back. "I won't stay long tonight," she said. "I just wanted to see if it felt the same without the stars." "And does it?" Kiyoshi asked. She thought for a moment. "Yes," she said. "Just quieter." She turned and walked away, her footsteps dissolving quickly into the dark. Kiyoshi remained where he was. The clouds above him shifted slowly, revealing no sky, only deeper layers of shadow. He realized then that the stars had never been the reason he came. They had only made the river easier to notice. The night itself had always been enough. He continued walking until his steps slowed on their own, until movement became optional. When he finally turned back toward home, it felt less like leaving and more like carrying something with him. The night followed for a while. Then, gently, it let him go. Chapter 5. When the river is only a sound. There were nights when the river could not be seen at all. Fog sometimes gathered along its surface, rising quietly from the water and spreading outward until the boundary between river and air dissolved. On those nights, the path seemed to float, unanchored, as if it were suspended between places rather than connected to them. Kiyoshi walked anyway. Without sight, he relied on sound. The river spoke in layers. There was the continuous movement beneath everything, the steady passing of water against itself. Beneath that were smaller sounds, water brushing against stones, reeds shifting, the occasional soft interruption where the current met resistance and adjusted. Listening required a different kind of attention. It was not focused, exactly. Focus implied effort. This was closer to allowance. He let the sound reach him without trying to separate it into parts. His footsteps felt distant, as though they belonged to someone else walking nearby. At one point, he stopped. The sound of the river continued without change. That, too, felt important. During the day, his presence always altered things. Conversations shifted when he entered a room. Silence thickened or broke. At night, beside the river, nothing reacted to him at all. He stood there longer than he realized. Eventually, another sound entered the space. Breathing. It came from somewhere close, but not immediately identifiable. It did not disrupt the river's rhythm. It layered itself gently on top of it. "You stopped," a voice said softly. Kiyoshi did not turn. "So did you," he replied. The woman stood beside him, her outline barely visible in the fog. She seemed less defined than before, as though the night had begun to borrow her edges. "When I can't see the river," she said, "I listen to make sure it's still there." "And is it?" Kiyoshi asked. "Yes," she said, "it always is." They stood together, facing the same direction, sharing the same limited visibility. The fog dampened distance, making the world feel smaller, more contained. "I used to think I came here to escape," she said after a while. "From rooms, from expectations. And now?" Kiyoshi asked. "Now I think I come here to arrive," she said. "Even if I don't know where." He understood this without needing to agree or disagree. The river continued, unconcerned with their understanding. After some time, the fog thinned slightly. The faint suggestion of water returned, though it still resisted clear definition. "I should go," she said quietly. "Before it changes again." Kiyoshi nodded. "Good night," he said. "Good night," she replied. Her footsteps faded quickly, absorbed by the fog. Kiyoshi remained until the sound of the river felt complete again, until it no longer seemed to be waiting for anything. Then he walked home. That night, he dreamed of walking without feet, of moving through space without disturbing it. When he woke, the feeling lingered, not as memory, but as a gentle alignment. Chapter 6: Nights that leave no footprints. Winter arrived gradually. The air sharpened. The river's surface tightened, its movement more deliberate. Frost sometimes gathered along the edges of the path, disappearing by morning as if it had never been there. Kiyoshi noticed that fewer people walked at night. The path did not mind. Footprints appeared and vanished quickly, erased by time, by weather, by simple passage. The river remembered none of them. One night, snow fell. It did not fall heavily. It drifted, slow and uncertain, settling lightly on the ground. The path transformed, becoming a pale ribbon beside the dark water. Kiyoshi hesitated before stepping onto it. The snow would record him. He walked anyway. Each step left a clear impression, precise and temporary. He found himself slowing, not out of caution, but curiosity. He watched his own movement translated into shape, then slowly softened by continuing snowfall. Halfway along the path, he stopped and turned. Behind him, the footprints already looked incomplete. Ahead of him, the path remained untouched. He realized then that walking was not about leaving marks. It was about participating briefly in the surface of things. Further ahead, someone stood watching the snow gather on the railing. An older woman this time, wrapped in a thick scarf, her posture steady and unhurried. "It won't last," she said without turning. "No," Kiyoshi agreed. "But it's enough," she continued. "Just to know it could." She did not stay long. Neither did he. By morning, the snow was gone. The river moved as it always had. And the path waited, empty and unmarked, for the next night. Chapter 7: The Last Walk Without Knowing It. There was nothing to distinguish the night at first. No change in the sky, no unusual quiet, no feeling of conclusion. The town loosened itself as it always did after midnight. Lights dimmed. Sounds softened. The river waited in its usual way. Kiyoshi arrived without noticing the significance of his arrival. He walked at the same pace, along the same path, his steps falling into the familiar rhythm that no longer felt learned. It had become something his body remembered without instruction. The water reflected the sky imperfectly. A few stars appeared, scattered and faint, interrupted by drifting clouds. The reflections trembled, broke apart, returned. Kiyoshi watched them without counting. He did not look for the woman. He realized this only after some time had passed, that his attention had changed. There was no anticipation, no expectation of overlap. The path did not feel empty because it did not feel incomplete. He stopped near the place where the river narrowed. The sound there had always been slightly deeper, layered with a quiet insistence. Tonight, it felt familiar enough to be almost internal, as though it moved through him rather than beside him. A memory surfaced without an image. It was not a moment, not a scene, but a sensation, the feeling of standing still while something larger continued. He had felt it here before. He had felt it in other places too, though he could not name them now. "Are you listening?" The voice came from behind him. He turned. The woman stood a short distance away, her outline clear against the dim light. She looked the same as she always had, though Kiyoshi realized he could not have described her in detail even now. "Yes," he said, "I think I am." She stepped closer, stopping beside him. "I wondered if you would come tonight," she said. "So did I," he replied. They stood together, facing the river. "I don't think they'll be walking here much longer," she said after a while. Her tone carried no sadness. "I don't think I will either," Kiyoshi said. They did not ask each other why. The night did not require reasons. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The river continued, adjusting to stones and bends without pause. The stars shifted, their reflections rearranging themselves without settling into permanence. "Do you think the river notices us?" she asked. Kiyoshi considered the question carefully. "No," he said, "but I think it allows us." She nodded. "That feels enough." They walked together for a short distance, their footsteps briefly aligning before drifting slightly out of sync again. It did not matter. At a quiet bend in the path, she stopped. "This is far enough," she said. "Yes," Kiyoshi agreed. They stood facing one another, not quite looking directly, as though eye contact might make the moment too defined. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For walking," she replied. He did not answer because nothing needed to be added. She turned and walked away, her figure dissolving gradually into the distance until it became indistinguishable from the night itself. Kiyoshi remained. He did not follow. He listened until the sound of the river felt complete on its own. Then, without ceremony, he turned back toward home. He did not know this was the last time he would walk the path in this way. That knowledge belonged to later. Chapter 8. When the river walks alone. The nights continued. Kiyoshi slept more often now. Not deeply, not without interruption, but enough that the pull of the path softened. The river no longer waited at the edge of his thoughts. When he did pass near it, during the day or early evening, it looked smaller, more ordinary. The water moved with the same patience, but without invitation. At night, others still came. Sometimes he saw them from a distance, figures pausing near the railing, leaning forward slightly, listening. Sometimes the path was empty. The river did not change its behavior. It accepted footsteps and their absence with equal ease. There were nights when the sky was clear and full of stars. The reflections returned, scattering themselves generously across the surface of the water. No one counted them. No one needed to. The path remained. The night continued to widen and narrow, adjusting itself around whatever moved within it. And the river walked alone, if such a thing could be said. Epilogue: footsteps along the river of stars. Years later, someone new walked the path. They did not know the river's name. They did not think of stars or reflections. They only knew that sleep had not come easily, and that the night had felt too quiet to stay inside. Their footsteps softened as they reached the water. They slowed. They listened. The river accepted them without memory, without recognition. Above, the stars scattered themselves once more, indifferent and generous, finding the surface of the water and breaking apart. Footsteps moved along the river of stars. Not the same ones. Never the same. But always, quietly, enough. The house where the night never rushes. Prologue: a place that waits. The house stood at the edge of a small town, where the road slowly forgot its purpose. Street lights grew farther apart there, their light thinning as if it had learned not to insist. The pavement narrowed, then softened into something closer to memory than infrastructure. People still passed by during the day, but fewer did so at night, and those who did rarely noticed the house directly. It was not hidden. It did not try to be. The house simply waited. Its walls were clean, its roof intact, its windows unbroken. Nothing about it suggested abandonment or neglect. And yet, it carried no sense of urgency, as though time itself had learned to slow before crossing its threshold. During the day, it looked ordinary. A modest structure facing the road. A low fence, more symbolic than protective. A small garden that did not try to impress. There were no flowers demanding attention. Instead, there was space. Carefully kept emptiness. Stones are placed not for decoration, but for balance. A single tree stood near the center, its branches spreading wide enough to cast shade without dominance. The house did not ask to be noticed. At night, however, something shifted. Not in appearance, but in atmosphere. The light inside the house never snapped on or off. It did not flare suddenly, nor did it retreat into darkness. It existed already soft, steady, as though the night itself had chosen to rest there. Inside, clocks were present but unimportant. Their hands moved. Their ticking could be heard. But no one responded to them. Time passed, but it did not press forward. It spread instead, filling rooms gently, like warm air settling into corners. Sounds softened as soon as they entered the house. Footsteps lost their edges. Voices lowered without effort. Even thoughts seemed to slow, their sharpness rounding off naturally. This was a house where the night never rushed. People arrived without intention. Some stayed only briefly, sitting long enough to feel their breathing change. Some slept deeply. Some did not sleep at all, but rested in other ways. Some returned, again and again, without explaining why. The house did not remember faces. It remembered pace. And it welcomed only those who arrived slowly enough to notice they had stopped hurrying. Chapter 1: The Man Who Arrived After Midnight. The man arrived after midnight, when the town had already folded itself into quiet. His name was Shun, though he did not think of it as he walked. Names belonged to daylight, to conversation, to schedules that needed confirmation. Tonight, he carried nothing that required introduction. He had not planned to come this far. At first, he had only stepped outside his apartment. The room had felt too still, too aware of him. Sleep had hovered nearby without settling, as though waiting for something he could not provide. So he walked. The streets emptied gradually. Convenience stores closed their doors. Windows darkened one by one. Sounds stretched and softened, losing their urgency as the night deepened. When Shun noticed the house, he had already slowed. The gate stood slightly open, not inviting, but not closed either. A single window glowed faintly from within, its light steady and calm, without flicker. He stopped in the garden. The air felt different there, cooler, but not cold. Slower, but not heavy. It moved as if it had more time than the rest of the night. He stood still long enough to feel his shoulders lower. The door opened before he knocked. An older woman stood inside, her posture relaxed, her expression neutral in a way that carried no distance. She did not look surprised to see him. "It's late," she said, gently. "Yes," Shun replied after a moment. "I hope that's all right." She looked at him for a second longer, not assessing, but listening. "The night doesn't hurry here," she said. "You're not late." She stepped aside. The warmth inside the house was subtle. It did not come from heat alone, but from the absence of tension. The air felt settled, as though it had already decided to remain the way it was. Shun removed his shoes. The floor beneath his feet was cool and solid, grounding him immediately. Somewhere deeper in the house, a clock marked time without insistence. A kettle rested on the stove, silent and unboiling. "Is this your first time?" the woman asked as she closed the door softly behind him. "Yes." "Then sit for a while," she said. "There's no need to decide anything yet." She led him into a small room facing the garden. The window was open just enough to let the night breathe inside. Outside, the tree's shadow barely moved, its leaves still. Shun sat. The chair accepted him without creaking. His breathing slowed without instruction. "People often come here without a reason," the woman said as she poured water into a cup, though she did not offer it yet. "It's easier that way." Shun considered responding. He searched for an explanation, found none, and let the search dissolve. "I couldn't sleep," he said finally. "That's enough," she replied. Silence settled between them, not as an absence of sound, but as a shared condition. The night outside leaned gently toward the window, listening without demand. After a while, the woman stood. "I'll prepare a room," she said. "You can rest. Or just lie down. Either is fine." "Thank you," Shun said. She moved down the hallway without hurry. Her footsteps did not echo. They existed briefly, then faded. Shun remained seated, watching the garden breathe slowly in the dark. For the first time that night, he did not feel late. The house held the night open around him, unmeasured, unafraid. And somewhere within its quiet walls, time loosened its grip, just enough. Chapter 2: Rooms that do not ask questions. The room prepared for Shun was small, but it did not feel limited. It contained only what was necessary, though necessity seemed to have been defined gently here. A low bed rested against the far wall, its blanket folded with care but not precision. A lamp stood nearby, already on, its light steady and dim. There was no mirror. The absence of reflection felt intentional. Shun stood in the doorway for a moment, not because he hesitated, but because his body had not yet caught up with the fact that nothing was expected of him. The room did not suggest what he should do next. It did not ask him to sleep. It did not ask him to stay awake. It waited. He stepped inside. The floor accepted his weight without sound. When he sat on the edge of the bed, it did not shift or respond dramatically. Everything in the room seemed designed to avoid reaction. Shun exhaled. The woman returned quietly, carrying a cup of tea. Steam rose slowly, then thinned, then disappeared. "You don't have to drink it," she said. "But it will be here if you want it." She placed the cup on a small table near the bed. Shun nodded. "Thank you." She did not leave immediately. Instead, she stood near the doorway, her presence steady but unobtrusive, as if she were making sure the room had fully settled around him. "This house doesn't ask questions," she said after a while. "That surprises some people. I think that's why I noticed it," Shun replied. She smiled faintly. "Most places want something from you," she said. "Time. Answers. Movement. And this one doesn't?" he asked. "It wants you to slow down enough to stop offering things," she said. Shun considered this. The idea did not feel abstract. It felt practical. "When I walked in," he said, "it felt like I arrived somewhere that had already decided to wait." "That's accurate," she replied. "The night arrives here early. It stays late." She turned to leave, then paused. "If you need anything, you can leave the door open," she said. "If you don't, you can close it." She did not wait for a response. When she was gone, the room grew quieter, though not emptier. The air felt settled, as if it had completed a slow exhale. Shun lay down without removing all of his clothes. The blanket was heavier than he expected, but not warm enough to induce sleep. It pressed gently, enough to be noticed, not enough to restrict movement. He stared at the ceiling. There was no pattern there. No crack to follow. No shadow demanding interpretation. The surface existed simply to be above him. Time passed. He did not track it. At some point, he became aware of a sound moving through the house, not footsteps, not voices, but something subtler. The quiet itself seemed to shift slightly, redistributing its weight. He closed his eyes. Sleep approached, retreated, then hovered again. Instead of resisting, Shun let it remain uncertain. A memory surfaced. Not a scene, not a narrative, but a sensation, the feeling of being somewhere as a child, late at night, aware that adults were still awake in another room. The comfort had not come from interaction, but from the knowledge of continued presence. The house felt like that. After some time, he heard another sound. A soft knock. Not on his door, but somewhere farther away. A signal without urgency. Shun opened his eyes. The door to his room was slightly ajar. He did not remember opening it. He sat up and listened. Voices drifted faintly through the hallway. "You can stay as long as you like," the older woman was saying. "I don't think they'll sleep," another voice replied. Younger. Uncertain. "That's fine," she said. "Rest doesn't require sleep." Shun did not feel like an intruder listening. The sounds did not belong to him, but they did not exclude him either. He lay back down. The tea on the table had cooled. He took a sip. It tasted mild, almost absent of flavor, yet unmistakably present. The warmth traveled slowly, without urgency, settling rather than spreading. He closed his eyes again. This time, sleep did not arrive fully. But something else did. A loosening. Thoughts still appeared, but they did not insist on sequence. They passed through without asking to be followed. Time expanded, then thinned, then lost its edges entirely. When Shun finally drifted into sleep, it was without recognition. He did not notice crossing into it. The house did not mark the moment. Chapter 3: The Sound of Tea Cooling. The house sounded different at night. This was not something Shun noticed immediately. It revealed itself gradually, the way temperature does when one stops moving. At first, there was only quiet, wide, unshaped, seemingly empty. But as he remained still, the quiet separated into layers. There was the distant hum of the town, softened by walls and distance. Not silence, but something approaching it. Beneath it, the house itself breathed wood settling, air shifting slowly through narrow spaces, the faint acknowledgement of structure adjusting to night. And somewhere between these layers, there was the sound of tea cooling. It was not audible in the usual sense. No steam hissed. No cup cracked. The sound existed only as a change in atmosphere, a subtle movement from warmth toward neutrality. Shun could feel it more than hear it, like the fading presence of a hand that had rested briefly on his shoulder. He lay still. The room remained unchanged. The lamp's light did not flicker. Shadows did not stretch or withdraw. Everything held its position with quiet commitment. At some point, Shun became aware that he was no longer waiting for sleep. This realization arrived without relief or disappointment. It was simply another adjustment, like shifting one's weight after standing too long in the same place. He opened his eyes. The ceiling was still without a pattern. The walls offered no narrative. The room did not respond to his attention. That, he realized, was its generosity. In other places, rooms reacted. They reminded him of unfinished tasks, of objects left where they did not belong, of clocks and screens and expectations. This room did none of that. It did not reflect him. It allowed him to remain undefined. A sound moved through the hallway. Footsteps, slow and unhurried. They did not approach his door directly. They passed, paused somewhere farther away, then continued. Whoever walked did so without a destination, or perhaps with one that did not require arrival. Shun closed his eyes again. Memories surfaced, but they did not insist on coherence. They appeared as fragments light through a train window, the feeling of standing in line late at night. The muted relief of knowing that nothing more would be asked of him that day. The house absorbed these fragments without response. Some time later, how much, he could not tell. There was a soft knock. This time, it was closer. Not on his door, but near enough that it altered the shape of the quiet. "Yes," Shun said, his voice low and untested. The door opened slightly. The older woman stood there, holding another cup. "I thought you might still be awake," she said. "I am," Shun replied. "But I'm not restless." "That's a good way to be awake," she said. She stepped inside and placed the cup beside the first one. The earlier tea had cooled completely, its surface still. "This one is fresh," she said. "You don't have to drink it now." "Thank you," Shun said. She did not sit. Instead, she leaned lightly against the wall, her presence steady but unassuming, as if she were part of the room's structure rather than a visitor. "People often ask what time it is," she said. "Especially at night. And what do you tell them?" Shun asked. "That time behaves differently here," she said. "Which usually answers nothing." Shun smiled faintly. "I haven't wondered about time since I arrived," he said. "That's how we know the house is working," she replied. She glanced toward the window. Outside, the tree remained still. The night pressed gently against the glass, not seeking entry, only acknowledgement. "Do people stay long?" Shun asked. "Long enough," she said. "Sometimes that's one night. Sometimes it's many. Sometimes it's just this moment." "And you?" he asked. "Do you stay?" She considered this. "I suppose I do," she said. "But staying isn't quite the right word." "What is, then?" "Keeping the night company," she replied. She stood quietly for a while longer, then straightened. "I'll leave you to it," she said. "The tea will cool at its own pace." She left the room, closing the door without sound. Shun remained awake. He listened to the house settle again, to the quiet rearranging itself now that it had accommodated speech. The warmth of the fresh tea drifted upward, then slowly receded. Eventually, he drank it. The taste was simple, almost indistinct, but it grounded him. The warmth moved through him without urgency, then faded, leaving no trace of having been warm at all. He lay back. Sleep came and went in shallow waves. He did not pursue it. He did not resist it. He simply allowed the night to remain unhurried around him. And somewhere in the house, tea cooled completely, marking time in a way no clock could. Chapter 4: Guests who stay without arriving. Shun began to notice the others gradually. Not all at once, and not in a way that suggested gathering. They did not arrive together. There was no moment when the house became full. Instead, presence accumulated the way evening does quietly, without announcement. In the early hours of the night, someone sat in the room across the hall. Their door remained open. A low light spilled into the corridor, dim enough that it did not interrupt the darkness, only reshaped it slightly. Shun passed the doorway once, barefoot, moving slowly so as not to disturb the floor. Inside, a man sat on the floor, his back against the wall, eyes closed. He was not sleeping. He was listening. The man did not look up when Shun passed, and Shun did not greet him. The moment did not feel incomplete. It felt finished without having started. Later, in the kitchen, a woman stood by the counter, holding a cup with both hands. The kettle was not boiling. It did not need to. The woman stared at the surface of the tea as if it were something that might move if watched carefully enough. When she noticed Shun, she inclined her head slightly. "You don't have to whisper here," she said softly. "The house already listens quietly." "I wasn't planning to speak," Shun replied. She smiled faintly. "That's often when people say the most," she said. They stood together without exchanging names. No introductions followed. Names, Shun sensed, would have added weight. They would have suggested continuation beyond the house, and the house did not require that. "How long have you been here?" Shun asked after some time. The woman considered the question. "I arrived yesterday," she said. "Or perhaps the day before. I stopped counting once the night stopped asking." Shun nodded. "That makes sense." She glanced toward the hallway. "People don't stay because they want to," she said. "They stay because the house doesn't ask them to leave." Shun did not disagree. He returned to his room afterward, though room felt less accurate now. It was not something assigned to him. It was simply where he happened to be when he lay down. Sleep found him again, briefly. When he woke, the house had shifted. Not dramatically, only enough that he noticed. The light in the hallway was dimmer. The air felt denser, as though the night had settled deeper into the structure. Somewhere, someone coughed softly, then fell quiet again. Shun rose and walked slowly through the house. In the sitting room, two people sat facing opposite directions. They were not together, but they shared the space easily. One stared out the window into the darkness. The other traced the rim of an empty cup with a finger, following its circle repeatedly without urgency. No one spoke. The older woman moved through the room, her steps barely audible. She adjusted a lamp, lowering its brightness slightly. She straightened a folded blanket that did not need straightening. Her movements were not tasks so much as acknowledgements. "This house fills up differently at night," she said when she noticed Shun. "How so?" he asked. "It fills with pauses," she replied. "During the day, people bring stories. At night, they bring spaces where stories used to be." She placed a cup on the table, though no one reached for it. "They stay," she continued, "until the space feels complete again." "And then they leave?" Shun asked. "Sometimes," she said. "Sometimes they realize they already have." Shun walked back toward the garden-facing room. He sat on the floor this time, leaning against the wall, letting the coolness press gently against his back. From here, he could hear the layered quiet of the house, the soft movement of people shifting position, the building settling further into the night, the distant acknowledgement of the town beyond the walls. No one spoke for a long time. Yet Shun felt accompanied, not by people, exactly, but by shared stillness. It was then that he understood something subtle. No one here was waiting for morning. Morning would come, eventually, but it was not the point. The guests were not passing the time. They were existing within it, allowing it to stretch around them without resistance. The house supported this without comment. It did not hold them. It did not release them. It simply remained slow enough for them to notice themselves again. Shun closed his eyes. For the first time in a long while, he did not feel like he was arriving anywhere. He felt like he was staying. Chapter 5: Hallways that lengthen at night. The hallway appeared unchanged at first. During the day, it was unremarkable, a straight passage connecting rooms that knew their purpose. Its length could be measured easily. One could cross it in a handful of steps without thinking. At night, measurement became unreliable. Shun noticed this the first time he walked it slowly. He had risen without urgency, drawn not by need but by a gentle awareness that the house was awake in a different way. The floor was cool beneath his feet. The air felt heavier than before, not with weight, but with attention. He stepped into the hallway. The light was low, not dimmed but settled, as though it had reached an agreement with the darkness. Shadows rested where they were, not stretching, not retreating. He walked. The sound of his steps did not echo. Instead, they seemed to dissolve almost immediately, absorbed by the space before they could travel. Halfway down the hall, or what he assumed was halfway, he stopped. The distance behind him felt shorter than it should have. Ahead of him, the hallway extended quietly, its end less defined than before. The door at the far side was still there, but it no longer felt like a destination. It felt more like a suggestion. Shun stood still. The house did not respond. That, too, was familiar now. When he resumed walking, he did so more slowly, allowing each step to complete itself before the next began. The hallway did not resist this pace. If anything, it accommodated it. The longer he walked, the less he felt he was moving through the house. It felt as though the house was moving around him. Doors appeared without announcement. Some were open, revealing rooms softly occupied. Others were closed, holding their quiet privately without implying secrecy. From one open doorway, the sound of breathing drifted out steady, unhurried. From another, the faint rustle of fabric as someone adjusted their position on a chair. No voices. No conversation seeking completion. Shun passed a window set into the hallway wall. Outside, the garden rested under a sky without stars. The tree stood unmoving, its branches held in place by darkness rather than wind. The glass reflected part of the hallway behind him, though the image felt slightly delayed, as if it needed time to decide how closely to follow him. He continued. At some point, he realized that he was no longer sure where he was going. This did not cause anxiety. It felt appropriate. In other places, direction mattered. Movement implied intention. Here, walking was simply a way of staying awake without effort. The older woman appeared at the far end of the hall, or perhaps she had always been there. She leaned lightly against the wall, her presence blending seamlessly into the structure of the house. "You walk carefully," she said. "I don't want to hurry it," Shun replied. She smiled. "The house appreciates that," she said. "It stretches when rushed. It settles when noticed." "Does it change often?" he asked. "Only at night," she replied. "During the day, it behaves as expected. At night, it remembers that it doesn't have to." She began walking beside him, her steps even quieter than his. "People think houses are fixed," she continued. "But they listen. Especially when people stop moving through them and start staying inside them." They walked together without a destination. The hallway widened slightly, then narrowed again, its proportions shifting just enough to be felt but not enough to be named. The walls seemed less interested in containing space than in holding quiet. "Do you ever get lost?" Shun asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but only in ways that are useful." They stopped near a corner that Shun did not remember passing before. The corner did not lead anywhere obvious. It simply existed, allowing the hallway to pause before continuing. "This is where people usually turn back," she said. "And if they don't?" Shun asked. "Then the house knows they're ready to stay a little longer," she replied. They stood there for a while. The night pressed gently against the walls, not seeking entry, only contact. Somewhere deeper in the house, a floorboard settled with a soft acknowledgement. A distant clock marked an hour no one responded to. Eventually, the woman stepped away. "You can return to your room," she said. "Or you can keep walking." Shun looked down the hallway. It extended quietly, offering neither promise nor warning. "I think I'll keep walking," he said. She nodded, satisfied, and turned back the way they had come. Her presence faded gradually, absorbed into the soft geometry of the house. Shun continued alone. The hallway accepted him without question, lengthening just enough to match his pace. And for the first time, he understood that the house did not delay the night. It allowed the night to take the time it needed. Chapter 6: The Hours That Do Not Belong to Morning. There was a stretch of time before morning that the house treated differently. It did not announce this difference. There was no shift in light strong enough to notice, no sound that marked a boundary. The change existed only in how the night settled, how it seemed to stop moving forward and instead spread outward, occupying every available space. Shun felt it before he understood it. He was no longer sure how long he had been awake. Sleep had come in fragments, brief and shallow, drifting in and out without forming a complete shape. Each time he opened his eyes, the room looked the same. The lamp remained dim. The shadows stayed where they were. Nothing suggested progress. This did not trouble him. If anything, it felt reassuring. He rose quietly and stepped into the hallway again. The house was awake, though no one appeared to be active. Presence lingered in the rooms like warmth retained by walls after a fire had gone out. People were still here, but no one was doing anything that required witnessing. In the sitting room, someone lay on the floor beneath a blanket, breathing evenly. Nearby, another guest sat upright, eyes open, hands resting loosely in their lap. They did not look tired. They did not look alert. They existed in a state that did not require description. Shun paused at the doorway. "It feels like time stopped," he said quietly, unsure whom he was speaking to. The older woman replied from somewhere behind him. "It didn't stop," she said. It stepped aside. He turned. She stood near the wall, holding a tray with cups that no longer steamed. "These hours don't belong to morning," she continued. "Morning has expectations. These hours don't." She set the tray down and sat on the floor, folding her legs comfortably. Shun joined her. The floor was cool, grounding without drawing attention to itself. "People rarely notice this time," she said. "They sleep through it. Or they rush past it on their way to something else." "And here?" Shun asked. "Here, it stays," she replied. Because no one pushes it away. They sat in silence. The house seemed to listen more closely now, as if the quiet itself had leaned in. Outside, the garden remained unchanged. The tree held its shape against the dark sky, unmoving and unconcerned. Shun became aware of his breathing. It had slowed enough that each inhale felt deliberate, though he was not controlling it. Each exhale lingered slightly longer than the one before, as if there were no need to make space for the next. "I think I've been tired for a long time," he said. The woman nodded. "Most people are," she said. "But they don't always know what kind of tired it is." "What kind is this?" he asked. "The kind that comes from always arriving," she replied. "And never staying." Shun let the words settle. They felt accurate without being sharp. Around them, the other guests remained quiet. No one shifted. No one spoke. The shared stillness did not feel fragile. It felt practiced, as though everyone had arrived independently at the same understanding. The hours stretched. Shun could not have said how many passed. At some point, he noticed a change not in the house, but in himself. The part of him that anticipated the next moment had grown quiet. He was no longer wondering what would follow this. The present felt sufficient on its own. "This is usually when people decide," the woman said softly. "Decide what?" Shun asked. "Whether they want to leave before morning," she replied. "Or whether they'll let the morning find them here." "And if they stay?" he asked. "They wake up differently," she said. "Not earlier. Not later. Just differently." Shun looked around the room. The guests are resting without sleep. The cups are cooling without being emptied. At the light, holding steady without brightening. "I think I understand why the night doesn't rush here," he said. The woman smiled. "It doesn't need to," she said. "No one is chasing it." They remained seated as the hours continued to exist without direction. Somewhere far beyond the house, the idea of morning began to form, but here, it had not yet found a reason to knock. The house held the night gently, allowing it to finish being itself. And Shun stayed, not because he had decided to, but because there was nothing left that required him to hurry. Chapter 7: When leaving becomes optional. The idea of leaving did not arrive suddenly. It did not announce itself as a decision, nor did it appear as a question demanding an answer. Instead, it entered the house the way light does before dawn, gradually, without definition, felt more than seen. Shun noticed it first as a subtle shift in attention. The house felt the same. The air held the same weight. The night continued to exist without interruption. And yet, Somewhere beneath this consistency, there was a loosening, a suggestion that movement was once again possible. Not required. Just possible. He stood near the window facing the garden. The sky remained dark, but it had changed texture. It was no longer deep and endless. It felt closer, as though it had begun to gather itself, preparing for something it was in no hurry to become. Behind him, the house rested. Guests remained in their chosen stillness. Some had fallen into true sleep. Others remained awake, eyes open, breathing slow and even. No one is prepared to leave. No one is prepared to stay. Shun turned away from the window. The hallway waited. It no longer lengthened as he walked, but it had not returned to its daytime shape either. Distance remained flexible, responsive rather than fixed. He walked until he reached the entrance. The door was closed, but not sealed. Light from inside touched its edges gently, as if reminding it of what lay beyond without urging it open. The older woman stood nearby. She was arranging shoes near the doorway, though none appeared out of place. Her movements were slow, not corrective, simply attentive. "You're thinking about leaving," she said, without looking up. "Yes," Shun replied. "But it doesn't feel like something I need to do." "That's when people usually notice it," she said. "Leaving only matters when it stops being urgent." Shun sat down on the step near the door. "If I leave," he said, "will the night end?" The woman smiled softly. "No," she said. "The night will continue. Just not around you in the same way." "And if I stay?" "It will continue too," she replied. "Just with you inside it." Shun considered the space beyond the door. The town would still be quiet. Streets would still be empty. His apartment would still be there, unchanged, waiting without awareness. Morning would eventually arrive, bringing structure, names, and responsibilities. None of this felt threatening. But none of it felt necessary either. "I thought coming here meant I was escaping something," he said. "And now?" the woman asked. "Now it feels like I stopped escaping long enough to notice I didn't need to," he replied. She nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already known. "People don't leave this house because they're ready," she said. "They leave because the outside remembers them." Shun listened. The house did not try to claim him. That, he realized, was its quiet strength. It did not offer refuge in exchange for loyalty. It did not promise transformation. It did not insist on a return. It simply made leaving optional. He stood. "I think I'll go before the light changes," he said. The woman looked at him then, her gaze steady and kind. "That's a good time," she said. "The night doesn't mind being left like this." He put on his shoes slowly. The act felt ceremonial, though nothing marked it as such. Each movement completed itself without being rushed by the next. At the door, he paused. "Will it be the same if I come back?" he asked. The woman considered this. "It will be slow," she said. "That's the only thing it promises." Shun nodded. He opened the door. Cool air entered quietly, not rushing in, not pulling him out. The garden waited exactly as it had all night. The tree held its shape. The stones remained where they were. He stepped outside. Behind him, the door closed without sound. The house did not wave him away. It did not hold the door open. It simply returned to its stillness, allowing the night to continue finishing itself. Shun walked down the path toward the road. He did not look back. There was no need. The night remained unhurried. And for the first time in a long while, so did he. Chapter 8: The Shape of a Morning That Waits. Morning did not arrive all at once. It never did here. Instead, it gathered itself slowly, as if aware that it was entering a place where time was not expected to behave. Light did not push against the dark. It rested beside it, testing the space gently. Shun walked along the quiet road leading away from the house. The sky above him was neither night nor day. It held a pale, uncertain tone, like a thought not yet fully formed. Clouds remained still, suspended without direction. He noticed that his steps sounded different now. Not louder, just more defined. Each footfall returned to him clearly, no longer absorbed by the ground. The world beyond the house accepted movement again. It responded to the presence instead of holding it. And yet, Shun did not feel rushed. The town remained asleep. Shops were closed. Windows were dark. No engines stirred. No voices rose to meet the morning. This, too, felt deliberate. He reached a bridge crossing a narrow river. The water moved quietly, reflecting the softening sky without distortion. The surface did not hurry. It flowed because that was what it did, not because it was trying to reach anything. Shun stopped at the center of the bridge. He leaned on the railing and looked down. For a moment, he felt as though the night were still around him, not behind him, not ahead of him, but beside him. It had not ended. It had simply loosened its hold. This is how it waits, he thought. Not by stopping, by slowing enough to be carried forward without effort. He stayed there until the light shifted again. Not brighter, just clearer. When he resumed walking, the town began to wake in small, careful ways. A distant door opened, then closed. A bicycle passed quietly. Somewhere, a radio turned on at a low volume. Morning did not announce itself. It entered with the same courtesy the night had shown. At his apartment, Shun removed his shoes and stepped inside. The space felt smaller than the house, but not unwelcoming. Familiar objects rested where he had left them. Nothing had changed, and yet, something had. He set down his bag and sat on the floor. He did not turn on the lights. There was no need. The pale morning reached into the room gently, resting on the walls, the floor, the quiet air. Shun closed his eyes. He did not sleep. He rested. The hours continued without demand. Time resumed its shape, but it no longer pressed. Somewhere, far away, the house remained. It held the remainder of the night without concern for who was present to witness it. Morning moved forward, but it did not rush. Epilogue: when morning knocks softly. Morning eventually knocked. Not on a door, and not with sound, but with the simple insistence of light becoming enough. The world adjusted itself without urgency. Shun opened his eyes. The room was bright now, though the brightness felt earned rather than imposed. Outside, the town had fully awakened. People moved with purpose. Cars passed. Voices rose and fell. He stood and stretched slowly. Nothing pulled at him. Nothing waited impatiently. As he stepped into the day, he carried the night with him not as memory, but as pace. Somewhere, in a place where time remained willing to slow, a house continued to exist. It did not call to those who had left. It did not close itself to those who might arrive. It simply remained where the night never rushed. And when morning came there, too, it knocked softly.